Welcome to the panel, The Flows Between Education and Incarceration. My name is Reiko Hillier, and I'm Associate Professor of History here at Lewis and Clark College, and I also teach in the Ethnic Studies and Gender Studies programs. Particularly relevant to this panel is that I teach an Inside Out Prison Exchange course, which is a course on the history of crime and punishment held at Columbia River Correctional Institution. And I'm so thrilled to be here with these panelists to explore this urgent and complex issue. We're not only going to consider how the tentacles of the carceral state reach into our school systems and disproportionately draw BIPOC students into the prison system, but also how people both inside and outside prison have worked to interrupt this pipeline and create what some people have called the prison to school pipeline. I will introduce each of the guests before they speak for the benefit of our latecomers and those who are prompt but who have short memories. And before we hear from those presenters, I'd just like to remind everyone in the audience of a few logistical matters. First, this panel is being recorded and no additional recordings are permitted. Your video and audio will remain muted unless you are a panelist or unless you plan to ask a question later. There will be time, therefore, for audience comments and questions when the panelists have concluded their remarks. So please jot down questions and save them for that moment, at which point you'll be invited to raise your hand through the participants feature, and you will be called on in order and will be able to receive your question. If you experience any technical problems, you can send a chat message directly and our technical wizard will help troubleshoot. We are also providing live captioning services, which people can access at the bottom of their screens. I want to just remind everyone that this panel is part of a larger symposium, an annual symposium, one of our great events at Lewis and Clark College. And the Zoom links are posted for each of these events at the symposium website. This afternoon, there's a panel on Black diasporic motherhood from 4 to 5:30. There's a keynote presentation this evening at 7 o'clock by Jason De Leon, and a full day of panels and other events tomorrow, with the conclusion of the symposium being Race Monologues, which is open to all Lewis and Clark community members, but you must register by 6 p.m. on Friday to receive access to watch that particular event. There are details on the symposium website. Also, you might want to check out the art exhibit, which is a digital gallery this year. The link for that is also on the conference website, the symposium website. And we encourage everyone to follow the symposium on social media at RWSympLC on Instagram and Twitter. So we will begin with a general question for all of our panelists. They'll offer some remarks in relationship to their personal experience and how it intersects with the theme of this panel. And then I have a few more directed questions for all of them. First, we'd like to hear from Ben Hall. Ben Hall was born in Portland. He grew up in Southeast and in North Portland and was recently released from prison after 22 years. He's an activist and a prison abolitionist, passionate about writing and thinking, and he believes strongly in the idea of world building and sharing one's narrative. I know all of this firsthand, as I have had Ben in my student in many capacities, but he is also my teacher. He is currently enrolled as an undergraduate at PSU, focusing on women's studies and social geography. And he also won a very prestigious scholarship, the Davis, I lost the name, Davis something scholarship, to fund his education there. And I'm going to ask you the question that I ask everyone to comment on for about 5 minutes, which is just to briefly introduce yourself and say a little bit about your perspective on the relationship between education and incarceration and your connection to that theme. Ben, can you unmute yourself? That might be hard to do, actually. There we go. Uh-oh.
Mute and video.
There we go.
Right, we're good. Trying to just set my phone up a little bit better so I can see it. There we go. Can you guys see me?
Yeah, could you put it, your head is a little cut off.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, I'll put it like that. Shit, there we go. Okay, so when I went to school, I as a kid, I had no thought about prison. Not really. I mean, I did have a thought that I might go there based on what, my parents had told me and some other teachers had told me my future was going to look like. But I didn't really understand what tracking was. And when I was a kid, I went to a school and they tracked me. I didn't know what that was until I went to college and prison years later. Basically, they picked me, who wasn't a great student, I guess, and they said, well, we think this trade school would be more efficient for you, something that you could get along better at. And they moved me to a place called Vocational Village, which is where all the basically underprivileged and gang members in the city of Portland went to school. And, so what I didn't understand then that I fundamentally understand now is that in many ways, the public school system, I can't blame anybody at fault for it, but it prepares people to go to prison in some ways. It takes what they feel are the most gifted students, usually the students with the most money, double parents that have a lot of attention, and it sends them, pushes them through in a way that, that's how it was when I went to school. I'm 46 years old. I just turned 46. And education became a whole new thing for me when I came to prison. I took my first Inside Out class. That's my connection to how I met Reiko. I actually met Reiko at a training for instructors for Inside Out. And I remember thinking she's really fiery, but I feel like prison with the bells, the schedule, the things like it's all things that prepares you to be a worker or prepares you to be in prison, in my opinion, in some cases. But education opened up doors for me also in prison. People always talk about how the students that I met in Inside Out are privileged, that they're expected to go to school, that's, they come from a different, background. But I feel that I was privileged because my first experience with college was something that transcended. It's called something learning, right? Which basically means interactive learning. I can't remember the word right now, but transformative learning. That's what it is, transformative learning. So it's a pedagogy that's it's newer to really, in my opinion, like for me, it was new, where you're learning collaboratively, right? And you're bringing people in from, I don't want to go on about Inside Out, but bring these people in and you connect on a human level, right? And for me, that was my first experience with college. So that made me feel privileged in a way that, my first paper, my first class, I just assumed I was going to fail. I just thought there's no way I could read Marx and classics of criminology and understand it. But I remember reading it like 3 or 4 times, like shit spread out on the floor of my cell. Like my final paper, I wrote in pencil, double space, like 25 pages. And that work showed me that I could do that I was a lot smarter than I thought I was, that I could learn, that I had the ability to learn like anybody that was privileged. And I brought with me what Walida and Mauricia called the earned experience, in the sense that, I'm not a person of color, you know what I mean? I grew up with a lot of people of color, but I understand what it's like to be in prison for over 22 years. And education is denied. If you look at Nelson Mandela and South Africa and different countries, that's one of the key things that they denied people was education, because education opens up your mind to something different, and when it's, and I think when I met Vicky Ridenour is when my concept of education began to change. Like right now, we were reading these books by these, academia guys that use a lot of big words, and the people that they're advocating for don't understand what the hell they're reading when they read it. And so one of the things that we've tried to do is bridge that gap, like speak in a language. Some of the people in Harvard have brought in guys from the streets, for what they call fellowships, and they bring their earned experience, where these students bring in their minds and their book stuff that they've read, and they're brilliant, a lot of these outside students. But I had something a little more prepared, but that's not what came out. Yeah, I think education and prison are linked in a lot more ways than we think. You know, uh, I think it's Bell maybe that argues that, but it just prepares you for prison. And that's what I felt like, because when I went to school, I couldn't wear a coat in the building because people had pistols that they would hide outside. And at the end of school, like all these gang members, their older friends would show up, and the gang task force was there. Like, so it was just like a training ground to go to prison. Um, I mean, there's a lot of agency and choice involved, but at the same time, like there's a structural thing that I'm sure all you guys have read about that prepares you for a different life. I think that's all I got on that one.
Great. Well, thank you. We'll hear from you more when we have further questions. We'll turn to Quiz, who is a recently incarcerated member of Liberation Literacy, affectionately known as LibLit. A lot of our Lewis and Clark students have been involved in that organization. It's a nonprofit dedicated to taking back our communities by easing the transition after incarceration, empowering our abilities to heal, and dismantling the prison industrial complex. Quiz is also the host of Tin Can Phone, which is a podcast that was born inside Columbia River Correctional Institution. Quiz works for the betterment of inner city communities, such as the one he came from in South Sacramento. And in addition to being a musician and poet, Quiz is the father of a baby girl. And I should add here too that I know Quiz as well from Columbia River, and together we've participated in a number of initiatives there. So Quiz, tell us about what you can share about your early educational experience and its relationship to prison, and if we want the other way around as well, your experience in education in prison.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. It's the Quiz. Misfit. So I grew up in South Sacramento, and what we call the trenches, low income housing projects, inner city living. You know what I mean? I never really looked at it as a bad thing because that's what I come from. But school was most definitely prison. School was a breeding ground for recruiting. School was a breeding ground for fighting. School was, and the thing about it is, I went to G Parkway Elementary, Fern Bacon Middle School, and Burbank High School in Southside Sacramento. And I know personally teachers that will bet on who was gonna get beat up, or teachers that would encourage, like, dang, I feel like I'm lightweight snitching. I feel like I'm lightweight snitching, but like I remember going to certain teachers like, hey, lock the doors, you feel me? We got to get it in, like, you feel me? And like teachers actually locking the doors for us to fight. And at the time it was cool to me, knowing that when I go to school, if I got a problem, we gonna handle it. On top of that, walking into school, metal detectors, you had pat downs. This is junior high though, like this is even before high school. Like I remember like me and the homies walking to school and like, hey, where we gonna hide the bangers? You feel me? Where we gonna hide, you feel me, the knives? Like where we gonna hide all these different things? Because we know it's going down at school, but we can't get it in the school. So immediately after school, you feel me, when we get out them gates, it's go time. And it's a reminder of, in prison, sometimes you can't react or do the things you want to do immediately, but you got to be clever about how you're gonna get away with your crime. And for me too, understanding like a lot of the teachers at my school did not care. Like even playing football, like football was my whole motivation to go to school. And I got to play football without having the grades. Like my coach wasn't tripping. Like if we winning and we good, man, fuck them grades. Like we letting you play, which years later he ended up getting in trouble for. But I just remember like my authority breaking the rules. And not only was my authority breaking the rules, it was just like the school itself was like an institution. You feel me? Like with the big fences, the brick walls, you got to walk in the building, metal detectors. You got, what we call school security. That was the police. You got them walking around. It wasn't armed police officers at this time. It was school security. You know what I mean? They rode around in little buggies and tried to catch us doing what we was doing. But they had the sew on badges. You feel me? They had their badges. They shit was sold on their shirt. And but I remember like getting away from them. I remember like being young and like, all right, how we gonna ditch at lunch? You feel me? We know the security gonna be posted up over here, or we know, and then the cameras at school. You know what I'm saying? Like I remember being in junior high, and I remember like the feeling of 24-hour surveillance. Like anytime we go to school, like we know we under
No
surveillance.
problem.
So how do we get away with this? And then I went to prison at 19 years old, and I did 7 years. And then I got out for a couple months and went back for another 3 years, which I'm freshly released again. But I just walking into prison, even my fellow students, like they all mentioned, like, wow, it's paintings on the wall. Wow, this kind of reminds me of school. Exactly. Like, so when I walked into prison, it wasn't new to me. Oh, the metal detector, used to that. You feel me? Like police everywhere, used to that. Like I literally, and I just found out that I literally lived the school to prison pipeline. Like from 6th grade, 7th grade, all the way to 11th grade when I dropped out. I don't know how I passed. Like I never did homework. I ditched half the school year, but yet and still, the next year I was in the next grade. And I'm like, how am I passing? Like I'm juiced because my mom ain't got to whip me, you feel me? So I'm juiced, but I'm like smart enough, and I'm realizing like I haven't done a lick of homework. Like I ain't turned in one homework assignment. In school, I'm messing around, class clown, not tripping, but I'm passing. So again, this ties into prison. There's educational institutions that come to these prisons, but there's no form of you have to go to these things. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't come and wake you up. Hey, make sure you go to school, or make sure you go to class, or go to inside out, go to lip. Like it was none of that. It was just like, okay, these things are here, which they really didn't want there because of like Ben was talking about the community that you could build, and they humanized us. When my fellow students came in there, I wasn't inmate Broughton, or I wasn't, you feel me, a SID number. It was whatever was on my name tag. And me being there never came up in discussion. Me being an inmate, or what they call adult in custody now, never came up. It was normalized, and they humanized us. And the system itself was so against that any little thing that might look like a little thing, they tried to nail it. Oh, this is why they don't need to be here. But then when you go further in the investigation, like, oh, no, she just handed him a jacket. That's all. Like, you feel me? Like it was something so small that they always tried to figure out a way to, because they humanize us. And like I always tell everybody that ever enters a prison, you become a witness. You become a witness of the realization of what's going on in prison. With you, they can no longer hide behind the illusion of rehabilitation. Yes, they have rehabilitating programs, but there's nobody waking me up like, hey, go to Lib Lit. Hey, Reiko here, go to class. Like, it's on me. And if I don't go, the institution could care less because they don't want the class in there anyway. So again, in school, I'm ditching school. They don't care. Pass them on. And I was just on the phone and I told somebody, like, now that I actually think about it, they passed me on from 6th grade all the way to prison. Like they just pass me. Nobody told me what I was doing was wrong. Nobody told me. And this is one thing I want to point out too before I stop. It's on our parents. It's on our neighborhood. It's really on our village too, because if the school is doing this to us, like you gotta make us do our homework. You gotta instill in us the importance of education. Our parents was only equipped with the tools to help us survive in those neighborhoods. Like it was never like, hey, do your homework. It was like, hey, make sure y'all walk to school together. Don't get caught by yourself. So our parents had, I'm gonna speak specifically about me. My mom, after my dad passed away when I was 11 years old, my mom just didn't know how to, all her kids was in foster care, which was another institution. I went to foster care at 5 years old, which was just institution after institution after institution. So I do say I'm a child of the system. So my mom didn't have a proper education to send us to school and make sure we had, the proper education to get further in school. When we came home from school, she was too busy worried about, is my kids even here? Y'all home safe? Okay, y'all cool. It wasn't do your homework or what's your homework or what's your, she didn't have the luxury to worry about those things. All my mom could worry about was you made it home without getting shot. You made it home without, the ills and the evils of our environment. So like as a parent now, I realize, hold on, I can't depend on the school to instill in my child the things that I would want them to have. So, you know, with my daughter, I make sure education, communication, talk, ask questions, communicate, because that's a big part of it. You know, like if I were to communicate this with the elders in my area, then maybe they could have got at the school. Hey, my son ain't really getting the proper help he need. It's 100 people in his classroom, and the teacher's only going to help the 5 that they know going to pass on, because it's going to look good on their report how many students they graduated up out the school. You feel me? It's a statistic thing. It's a sport. This shit is a sport, blood sport. And so I hope that kind of answers the question of my tie and connection from the school and prison pipeline.
Thank you, Quiz. We have a variety of perspectives here from different vantage points of these institutions. And with that, I'll introduce Carrie Hughes, who's a teacher at Roosevelt High School here in Portland, which has a partnership with Lewis and Clark, especially one of our professors here, Mitch Reyes. Carrie is also the director of Roosevelt's AVID program, which aims to undo the traditional tracking systems that selectively prepare students for college and professional careers. So Carrie, what is your initial short response to this theme of the relationship between, or the flows between, education and incarceration from the point of view of the teacher?
Well, first of all, I definitely can see some of those different patterns, right? In schools, very regulated and very regimented. And that part is something that we see in a lot of institutions and systems. But what we're trying to do with our partnership with Lewis and Clark is really work to disrupt that. And so I work with an AVID program. And so for those of you that don't know AVID, it's a national program that started in San Diego. I've been teaching it for 14 years. And essentially AVID stands for Advancement via Individual Determination, which is a way to help students from non-traditional college-going families and groups to help them access college. And so at Roosevelt, 74% of our students in AVID are non-white, and we currently have 80 seniors in that are working towards going to college. And we have some data that shows that what we're doing is helpful. So our data from last year is incomplete because we didn't, the pandemic kind of disrupted that. But from our class of 2019, we had 54 seniors, 87% were a racial or ethnic minority, and 75% of them had parents with no college experience. But of that same group of 54 seniors, 100% of them graduated from high school, and 93% planned on attending college. And those same 54 seniors earned over $1.8 million in scholarships to help them pay for that college experience. And part of how we've done that is with our partnership with Lewis and Clark in the rhetoric department. In our partnership, we have got Lewis and Clark students that come and meet with my students in small group, and together the students work together to devise plans to write their essays for both scholarship and college, which in itself would be great because as our previous has said, is that teachers don't always have time to do all of that. And so when the Lewis and Clark students come, they are able to help my students get that one-on-one help with those applications that I couldn't do. But it's also part of that because if you remember, 75% of my students have parents with no college experience at all. And so when the Lewis and Clark students come to campus and meet with my students every year, they're getting that essay help, but then they're also getting those near peers who can tell them, like, what's it like to go to a dining hall and eat, and what's it like to live in a dorm, and what's it like to live with people that your own family. So they get a more intimate college conversation. They teach them how to read a college syllabus, something that you know their parents can't teach them how to do. How do you get textbooks? You don't just go to the library like you did in high school. I can tell the kids that, but the near peer experience that they're getting from Lewis and Clark students is really great. And one of the best parts about the experience is at the end of the term is we take my students from Roosevelt up to Lewis and Clark. I hand them a map of the campus and I just say, hey, it's time for you to figure out where you're supposed to go. And I'm not in charge of you today. And you can just see in their faces, like, there's terror. Like, what do you mean you're not helping me? But then by the end of the day, you can see they've gone from like a scared high school senior to like someone who's like, yeah, I can do this thing. I can be a college student. And so they get kind of like a run through of their first day of college with their peers from high school, so that they've got that support. And I love that day because, you know, at the end of the day, when we're saying goodbye and this last time, there's definitely some tears between the mentors and my students. Because for my kids, like, they can see, like, I can do this. Like, I just spent this whole semester with this person who's not that different from me, and I can do these things. And just to kind of wrap it up, like, how do we know that this is kind of working? Well, so currently, two of my former avid students are actually now teachers within our building. One's teaching Spanish, one's teaching math, and the third one is acting as a college counselor for families. Fourth one is teaching dual language immersion, fourth grade in PPS. Two of them are nurses. Two of them are in pharmacy school at OSU. I've got multiple ones completing their MSWs. I've got students that have been accepted to Brown, Stanford, University of Miami, including Lewis and Clark. And these students continue to reach out. In fact, one literally yesterday just emailed me from Texas State. She said, hey, I just wanted to check in with you because here I am, I'm in grad school at Texas State, and you helped me get here with talking to me about loans and all of these different things. And what I love the most about our students is they're all coming back to the community, right? They're teaching in their neighborhood, they're teaching in their high school, they're doing the social services pieces. And so often they just say, just let me know who needs some assistance and I will help them out. And so they're really helping strengthen their communities so that their families and their communities build from this experience that they got from their college experience.
Fantastic. Thank you for that perspective, Carrie. We'll hear more from you later. I would now like to turn to Emija Smith, who is the founder of Colorful Communities, a family advocacy, education, and justice reform service organization. Emija earned her master's degree from the University of Washington's Evans School of Public Policy and Governance. She invests her time working to create racial equity policy, to eliminate racism and other forms of oppression while countering anti-Blackness. Emija.
Well, thank you and welcome everyone for being here. My name is Emija Smith, but I go by Emija, and I live in Seattle, Washington. I'm from the historical Central District, the African American community. I had the privilege to grow up there before it was gentrified, where I got the love and the nourishment and all the love from the diversity of the African American and Black community there. And so I still live in Seattle. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, first and foremost. My experience was a great experience as a child. I'm very much an advocate in the education system, but I will say that I was one of those students, the one of two, maybe Black students in the classroom of supposedly the gifted programs. But I will say that my family is full of intelligence, brilliance, excellence, and giftedness. And my community as well, for my peers who are around me. Too often though, our students that look like me are tracked into special education or educationally neglected, as Queese had shared. And I just want to shout out to Queese, meeting you for the first time. When I heard your story, I had to bring my son in here because all the things you were sharing about what the community should do and what parents should do, I do it. So I wanted him to hear that I'm not just an overbearing mother. So thank you. Yeah, so what really tapped me into this work around school to prison pipeline, to be honest, is during the 80s and the 90s and the crime bills, 3 strikes, Washington being the first state to do that. I really watched the impact of drugs being put into my community and gangs coming into the community. and watching this, the over policing and the racist policies that were impacting my community and my neighborhood. And as I was going through school, tracked, gifted, whatever, I was still very much impacted, because that education that I believe that we receive is anti-Black. It's not pro-Black. There's a very much a miseducation of African Americans in these systems. So when I was graduating from high school, and you think about, well, what do you want to do and who do you want to be? I was like, I'm going to be the first person to graduate from college. And don't get me wrong, my family, I'm a Jimerson. So if you know anything about Seattle or the Central District, that's a well-known family name. We're very much hardworking. I never grew up to think to go be on a system. And I believe that if you need a system and you need to support is deserved for Black and Indigenous people because of our experience here. But that's just not the way I grew up with strong work ethic. You know, you need to have a job and 2 side hustles. That's how I grew up. And they need to be legit at the same time still though. You know, you don't benefit, you ain't waiting for nobody to give you nothing. But nevertheless, I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. And in doing that, that was for me to be the celebrity in my family. When we think about the family tree, it wasn't about positional power. Because when you really grow up in a community that's surviving and we support each other, we don't care about your titles. We care about your word. We care about respecting each other and how we gonna get down with each other and support each other. Because you can have every title, but if you're not down with your community and you sell out however you want to determine that, we're not gonna fall to that positional power. So as much as I love education, have always, and always share my academic background, that's not what carries me. To be honest, it's my credibility in my community and my name and the hard work and what I give back to my community that to this day, I believe in my community, my name resonates well. And that means the world to me, and my children love me. I also want to share this school to prison pipeline background. Well, first and foremost, I watched too many of my peers be impacted where they had to raise themselves because their parents were impacted by being victim of addiction. I've watched many of my peers be incarcerated for way too long because of the unfair crime policies that were placed at that time. And they're just brilliant. And I didn't allow myself to be lullabied, which oftentimes a lot of us in our communities across race are lullabied. Instead of looking at the systemic and the prison industrial complex that's placed on communities, we rather than people are being victimized by that system, and then we continue to victimize them and not see them, their human side. We get caught up in the hype that's been told to us by the powers that be, the mainstream society. And I don't know why people are scared to say institutionalized racism or white supremacy. I'm not. This country was founded on that. And when you think about the 13th Amendment in that Constitution, first and foremost, they wasn't talking about me and my people, but also that 13th Amendment, once slavery should have been abolished and enslavement of African people and people in general, that 13th Amendment kept it going. And that's how our prison industrial complex really began and the policing systems began. So when you really understand those systems, you can better assess and see that, again, that my people might not be lynched literally the way they were being lynched back then, but they're still being lynched by the policies that are taking them through that system. Now I have 2 young boys right now, and I had to learn first and foremost, because my experience through education was I'm in a gifted program. I'm smart. My white peers know I'm smart to this day. You're hella a bomb in math. So my whole family's telling me that I'm smart. So I never grew up thinking that I was unintelligent. And so I'm not gonna think my children are unintelligent. And when I have first cousins who are like sister, brother cousins, skipping grades, I'm not thinking anybody in my family is unintelligent. And there's so many entrepreneurs who know how to get out here and go get it that I'm like, oh, ain't nobody unintelligent in my family. But when my boys hit kindergarten each year, I started to watch how the education system was trying to kill their spirit. Quality preschools, counting to 100, grading, reading, doing whatever. But these public schools start to just tell them that they're not smart. And I watched, not just for my children, but other Black children in particular, and our Latinx and our Indigenous, like by second, third grade, their spirits are low. They don't feel as smart as you knew that for them to be. And so I was a parent that at the school every day, dropping my kids off. I have an adult daughter, so I've done it for over 20 years. Every day at the school, checking in, because I know your spirit's good when I drop you off, but what's going on when I pick you back up? So I just wanted to share that there is something going on. I look at the principal at the school as a judge. I look at the teachers as the police or probation, even counselors, the probation officers. I mean, the whole setup is the same because they're more concerned about our Black and Indigenous and Latinx children being regulated and walking in a straight line rather than really cultivating their genius. So a lot of my work in the community is on all local and state levels of really doing justice reform to really correct the policies that have incarcerated my people, to get them out, make it retroactive, to make them, hold them accountable around Black Lives Matters, and really hold them accountable to really see my humanity and understand my value, my people's value. But in addition to that, I do it on the local level, on district levels, in school districts to make sure that these teachers, we talk about these SOR officers, are not bullying these kids. There's a lot of adultism going on, and a lot of adults who are just like straight up assaulting little kids, girls, boys, and it's just unacceptable. And dealing with these unions because it's hard to get those teachers out or get people out of their position because of the unions. So I'm gonna kind of stop there because I could go on, but at the end of the day, 10 toes down from my people, and that I'm all about, man, the ancestors pushed me forward. So I'm about something that's been going back further behind than just this current movement right now. Black Lives Matter has been going on since they took people, kidnapped them from Africa and brought them over here on the boat. So I got that warrior spirit in me to keep pushing that forward and never allowing people to get lullabied or pacified or too comfortable to forget what what my fight is about, liberation. And it's about liberation for not only my children, but for my grandchildren and the future generations to come. And hoping that I could work in solidarity with folks who don't understand that, who have a different sense of privilege, or the people who also have been oppressed, but they don't have the same walk as a Black person, as I don't have the same walk as an Indigenous, but there's an experience that needs to be honored and recognized. Thank you.
Thank you. Last in this round, we have Tai Griffith, who is the manager for justice education at the Claremont Colleges in California. She's a doctoral student in political science and government at Claremont Graduate University, and she is adjunct faculty in political science at Pitzer College. Tai has worked in the justice system for over 20 years and has over 15 years of experience in higher education. She's taught at 7 California prisons, 2 juvenile facilities, and 4 international prisons. Her work focuses on the criminalization of Black people in the United States, recidivism and reentry services for formerly incarcerated individuals, and the use of education as a tool for rehabilitation and community empowerment. Her goal is to develop programs and legislation that dismantle the prison industrial complex while expanding educational opportunities to underserved and underrepresented communities. Tai?
Thank you so much for that. And I know from that introduction, I may seem like I don't have a background, but I actually do. And so I am too a product of, the school to prison pipeline. I grew up in a neighborhood that was plagued with gang violence, police violence, drugs, and domestic violence. And so I became a product of that environment. I grew up fighting. I grew up going to schools where, my teachers never took an interest in me. I realized that my K through 12 education, I did not have not one Black teacher, right? And once I finally had a Black teacher, I recognized the difference. And there was a difference for me. And so getting caught up kind of in some of the woes of my neighborhood, I ended up in juvenile detention, Los Padrinos here in California. And so, spent some time there. And I ended up dropping out of school at 14. I got pregnant. And I was pretty much living, I think, the life that I was probably expected to live, being someone that was from my community. I spent most of my childhood going up and down the state of California, visiting different relatives and family members in prison. And so it's like, okay, this is, going to be your life. For me, my daughter was someone who really changed that for me, changed that perspective for me. And it was difficult because, again, I didn't, know anyone in my neighborhood that had ever gone to college. No one in my family had ever gone to college. And so for me, I didn't really value education as a child. And because there was no one that I was, encountering that, would inspire me or maybe see something in me that I didn't see in myself, I went down the path that I went down. But it wasn't until I was introduced to education at the ripe age of 24 that I really kind of invested myself. And from there, once I got to college and started realizing that, hey, I'm smart, I can do this, despite the fact that I had dropped out of high school, despite the fact that when I got to college, I tested lowest level math, lowest level English, right? Knowing that it was going to take me a really long time to reach those goals that I had set for myself, it really showed me the power of education. And so one of the things that I've really done is not leave my community, go back to my community, spread the power of education, help people take advantage of the educational system. And now that I am at a college, I manage a justice education program. I also manage a college program in prison. And I'm excited to advocate for folks who don't have a voice to advocate for themselves. I have been able, through my advocacy work, to get a bachelor's degree pathway program in the prison, in one of the prisons that we work with the hopes of being able to expand it. And so I know how serious the school to prison pipeline is. The vast majority of students that are in our prison program have been caught up in this pipeline since they were children, right? And so, just recognizing that the fact that, especially here in California, African-American children are 13% more likely to be caught up in this system. And looking specifically at suspensions, 13% of these students get suspended versus 3% of white students. And so recognizing that the more suspensions these students have, that increases their likelihood of ending up in, again, that school to prison pipeline. And that was my story. And so again, I'm just excited to be here with all of you to show that we can reverse that school to prison pipeline and turn it into a prison to school pipeline, because that is exactly how it worked for me. And I'm looking forward to discussing more about this on this panel. So thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you, all of you. You've given us already a lot to think about and talk about, but I'm going to proceed with a few more questions that push into a little more detail. So those of you who are discussing elementary and secondary school referred to, as Saeed just did, suspensions. Others of you have referred to teachers not having faith in your intellectual abilities and potential, or parents who were not able to support you. Public school systems also integrate police authorities within schools and have correspondingly adopted law enforcement policies such as bag searches and video surveillance. Queez mentioned metal detectors. Are those kinds of measures ever justified? And or what kind of effect does that practice have on the experience of education, on learning? I can ask Ben, since he went first, or if you want to pass, we could go to the next person down the line. Is there anyone who wants to speak to that question, the integration of police practices into the school itself. Ben? Mute, you gotta unmute. Oh, gotta unmute. It gives you a chance to practice what you want to say.
Yeah, there we go. I'm a little technologically behind, so plus I got bad equipment, but yeah, it was evident to me. Like, I didn't really understand it completely, but I remember their names. Like, I remember, Dave Condello, who left the school security to become gang task force. He became a police officer. I am going to plug my phone in while I'm talking because it just gave me like a low battery signal. Yeah, he and I remember like us running from him. He would chase us down when we would skip class just to bring us back, like, kind of like a herd of cattle more than anything else. But I remember their presence being a threat more so than the gang members I went to school with and the guys that I grew up with. You know what I mean? Like when they rolled up, like, for us, they were clearly the enemy, and now today more than ever, I see it, where some of these guys are armed now. They're actually police officers in some of the schools. And, my cousin was murdered by the police in 2014. She was shot in the head by Salem police when she ran from a stop, so I have a personal thing against, police and education, but it, just to reiterate, like, it really prepares you for a life of being incarcerated. You don't think it's just, and you also relate authority and education to that negative thing I did, that, and it's why I didn't want to be in school. I dropped out, and when you listen to these so-called experts, they talk like if they reach a certain number of cops that crime will end, like their answer is always more policing, and, and so I feel like, just like Quiz really hit home on when he talked about what we built in a place where they say we couldn't have it, and what all of you said, a few of you said about community being the stronger thing. And for me, that's what's the reality today as well. Like, when Live Lit, when I was in there, like I focused almost all my time outside of just the educational book on just helping volunteers understand how to, I need to word this correctly. I just try to help my peers and my volunteers learn with me to follow a higher ethic, when some rules aren't ethical, and when they say you can't have something, right, because it's a threat to them. That's how I see it. They don't want to see us building something and learning something. But they said you can't have it, but we did it anyway. We built something that it stands today, and it's being added onto all the time, in spite of police presence and the words escape me right now, just the tactics that they use, and so just like in school, we learned early our own tactics. You know what I mean? We learned what we could and we couldn't do. And after years and years in prison, I'm still learning like ways to fight back. Right. And it's not by tearing down. It's by building something that's intangible, but you can still grab it. Quiz and I and others, like, we're in touch today. We're friends. We're close, and we wouldn't, and I think we'll always have that. I think that when we can call on each other for stuff, and that's something no one can ever take from you, no matter what they wear, no matter what their authority is, but unfortunately what they can take from you, and they've taken from many young Black men, is their life, through murder and intimidation. And for me, it's, to this day, it's a concern when a police pulls me over. Like, I've less of a chance of getting in trouble than Quiz would, right? But my response to them is a concern for me, because I do understand my rights now, even whether they violate them or not, I'm going to exercise them to the fullest. Right. And I didn't understand that as a kid. I didn't understand that what they were doing to us was a crime, that, even in the school system, like, I remember them laying hands on us, you know what I mean? And back then it was okay. Right. Like, it was just considered something that was okay. And it still happens today, and it's okay. The only reason we're talking about it today, the only reason we're talking about a police officer slamming a little girl out of her desk is because there's something called a video camera today. So now they're forced to have this conversation, you know, but I said more probably outside of the question, but that was my experience that led to how I feel about the police. And it began in school.
Please, you touched on this a little bit and when you were talking about your experience in school, but do you want to say any more precisely, concretely about the presence of law enforcement personnel and law enforcement style practices in school and how that affected your learning, whether or not it was ever justified?
Yeah, like I just remember the difference in school security compared to like the police. It was just like, I don't know, it felt different. Like when we went to school, and mind you, like we were targeted by these people. Like it was like they were told when coming into school, like you gotta watch the black people. You gotta watch the black people, you feel me? Watch the ends. And we lived up to that. Like y'all gonna show us that y'all targeting us. Like class, I'm not paying attention in class. I'm thinking about how I'm finna shake your ass. You feel me? Like I'm paying attention. Like, can I go to the bathroom so that I could go see where they're located at? Where they were like right before the bell ring. Where they at? You feel me? Like where they at? Because I got to make sure I could wiggle and I could move differently. It became like real at that point. It became like, all right, fuck school security. Like now it's like, okay, this is really 5-0. And at 6, like I think I caught my first assault in 6th grade. So like I went to jail from school in elementary school. A boy kept touching my cousin's butt and I broke his arm. And I went to jail from school. You feel me? Like, so for me, it was way different. Like it really, really literally was like school to prison. Like I went to jail from school in elementary. They calling my moms and shit. Like, you got to come get him. Woo-doo-wah-wah-wah-wah. So like once it became the law enforcement at school, it became real for the quiz. It became real for me, being a victim of going to jail from there. And then like it also became it not clarified, but it solidified us versus them. I seen you take my daddy to jail. I seen you take my uncle to jail. I seen my mama, my pops can't be in the household because she got welfare. So when they come in to check it out, they bring the police with them. I done see my dad jump out back windows. I done see my dad tucked away in the closet. You feel me? For these inspections, just so my mama could keep her food stamps. You feel me? So then when I go to school, y'all here too? Like, bruh, you feel me? So the affection for me was, I'm not going to school. Like I dropped out. Like I seen what y'all did. Y'all broke my family up. My uncle gone, my daddy gone, my brother gone. Mama can't have no dude in the house because y'all coming to check. And now y'all at my school. I quit going. I quit. Fuck football. Excuse my language. Forget football. Forget. Learning was never the thing for me. Like learning was never, I'm going to school to learn. Fuck, I'm gonna learn. What am I gonna learn? Like y'all, I could raise my hand all day. The teacher's so used to me being a class clown, or the teacher don't get that much. Like, you're not even gonna call on me. You already expected me to have the wrong answer. Like, how is you a school, but you don't got enough books for everybody? How am I one of the ones that didn't get a book? You feel me? Like, how can I take this shit serious if y'all don't even got a book for? Like, come on, bro. This shit it's a joke to me. School became a joke to me. So now I'm just not even going. For what? For what? You feel me? And it mostly had to do with the police, because now teachers is, the teachers, they got their chest poked out. We got reinforcement. They talk to us different. You feel me? Your teacher talk to you different, and then they gonna threaten you with the police. Do we need to go outside the room? Let's go outside the room then. Punk, I'll beat your ass. You feel me? Like it made me have a problem with authority figures. Even to this day, I'm struggling with in any relationship. Don't tell me what to do. You feel me? And this is another thing. The police, they question you. They tell the truth. You can get, tell the truth is going to lead you. You tell the truth, they take your ass to jail anyway. In prison, you get caught with what they call contraband or anything. They let you explain yourself. You have a chance to argue your case. You argue your case, you get cooked anyway. I got to go with my staff. In school, they got to go with their staff. It became, you have to lie to get away. Like, there is no such thing as the truth anymore. Because at this point in school, I tell the truth, expelled, sent home, to jail. In prison, you tell the truth, your ass going to solitary confinement, you to the bucket. Like, so where do I truly tell the truth at? You feel me? Like everything's a lie. Everything is a lie. And it's just like you have to. Well, for me, I thought that I had to, and I did. But one thing about it, my mom always told me, I'm talking about from a kid, when I went to the foster home, my mama always said, you could lie to everybody else, but don't lie to me, because I'm gonna be the one to have your back. You feel me? So like, even to this day, my mom is the only person who I don't lie to. I tell my mom the truth about everything I do, but everybody else, good luck. You feel me? And so I'm just now learning to unlearn. It's not them versus me. And then being in prison too, I learned like, it's really not them versus me, it's me versus me. And they just here to distract what's going on with my growth. So like Lewis and Clark, that was my first college experience. Lib Lit, that was my first experience with, like, I read Frederick Douglass in there. As soon as I got to that class, we read it. I'm like, damn, they teaching me about my history. How come I didn't know none of this? How come I didn't know who Frederick Douglass was? How come I didn't know they was lying about Columbus? How come I didn't know they stole this land from the natives? You feel me? Like, it's so much I had to wait to be in prison to learn. Like, why didn't I? What? Nigga, so then I learned it, like, oh, it's an old saying, if you don't want a nigga to learn, put it in a book. They're not going to pick those up. Excuse my language again, but that's what the saying says. They're not going to pick that up. When I was living my life, what I think? Book? What book? Nigga, I'm not reading no book. You feel me? That's all mental enslavement. I arrested my development. And it came all the way back to them police being at school. I never stood a chance from that moment, because it was always them versus me. They was a weapon. They was, if you do anything, we're going to you want us to go get the police? You feel me? Like, go get the police? Like, oh, that's crazy. But that's how they affected me, though.
Carrie, I'm interested in your perspective as a teacher. I don't know what the police presence is at your school, but thinking about this notion that the teachers and police are sort of in cahoots as one kind of blended authority. And I wonder what your experience has been observing this kind of practice in the school setting from the point of view of a teacher.
Well, in Portland Public Schools, previously we had SROs for each high school area. So every high school had one SRO that would be there 1 to 2 times a week, but was also responsible for the feeder schools and the elementary schools. But this spring, following the death of George Floyd, Portland Public Schools has removed those SROs out of the high school. So we no longer have the police within our high school. We've terminated that contract. But I can see so much of that in that we talk about this idea that school is an institution that often is a pipeline to prison, and that it's all about rule following. And if you don't follow the rules, the majority of teachers in our country are white, and in Portland, the majority of our city is white. So therefore, the majority of our teachers are white, and that is historically what white people do, is call the police when they have a problem, when people aren't following their rules. And so I think that compounds the situation in that you've got conflicting pieces there. So yeah, I do see that. And I think there are some schools that are trying to change that, right? So we're trying to take the police out of it. And we're also in the process of building new schools in Portland. And one of the things they're doing in all these high schools is putting cameras into all the hallways. And so, you can see a fight in the hallway, and you can see 4 different angles from 4 different cameras. And so it continues to make this police state a presence. So, it might be that we've taken the police out of the building, but we haven't taken the police state out of the building yet. And that is something that we're going to have to continue to work with. And it's also, I think it goes back to community, right? Is when the teachers don't feel in community with their students, then they're going to want to enforce rules that they created. But when you're in community with somebody, you're working with the students, you're working with each other. And it's not my rules, it's our classroom rules. And we're going to work through this together. But I think that, you know, the fact that we continue to have majority white teachers like myself in classrooms that don't have these conversations and don't work to create this community, I think that's going to continue to be a problem as we move forward.
Thank you so much. In the interest of time, I'm going to direct a different question to Emija and Tai to do with disrupting the school to prison pipeline. What does disrupting the school to prison pipeline look like to you concretely? And for Tai, if you want to talk about your work at the Claremont colleges, what possibilities do you see from in introducing educational, higher education into carceral settings? Emija.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a multi-strategy approach to disrupting it, because I believe in the premise that is already a miseducation there. The premise for the Black community in particular, like in this country, we've been denied education. You're going to get killed if you spoke your language. You're going to get killed or tortured if you're caught reading. We've always had to teach ourselves and create our language. And throughout that process, it hasn't been, it's always been devalued. Or if the oppressor likes it, then they're going to appropriate it and try to claim it as theirs. So that's the dynamic that we're in. And so when I hear Queese share his story, I just want people to understand that is an experience as a Black young man. That is not everybody's experience. And so there's going to be some different, even if someone has a similar experience, it's going to be played out differently for folks. So one thing in Seattle right now, they're working on an anti-racism policy. And so there's a couple of different, some different language that's being put out there, but one group is putting out a proposal calling it pro-Black and pro-Indigenous, because there's so much anti-Blackness and invisibilization of Indigenous people that you have to just almost reverse that. So if it's pro-Black, then that means you're bringing in value, you're bringing in humanizing into the culture, into the conversation to make this policy transformative. That kind of helps people flip their minds and their brains to do something differently, to flip the narrative. It's an asset-based narrative. It's not about these bad kids and these broken families. No, it's about this leadership, this genius, this brilliance, this ingenuity, this innovation amongst these students. And it's across the board. When you do right by the Indigenous and the Black folks, everybody's gonna win. And particularly me, I'm gonna say, if you do right by Black people, you're gonna win because we take care of everybody. Come to the house, come sit down, come eat. That's just how we do culturally. So that would be that's something that I'm thinking about. But when we walk through the reality of the world where there's this privilege and there's this normalized whiteness, right? And to have normalized whiteness when it's founded around white supremacy, and I don't like to use supremacy anymore, but I'm trying to work on that, because it's an illusion of supremacy. It's an illusion that you hire and all this and that. That ain't real. We all people, we all human beings, and we all support each other, and we all can learn and develop with each other. But in order to keep that dichotomous thinking around, you have to have somebody who's at the bottom. So that's where the anti-Blackness comes in. So when you flip the narrative and make it pro-Black, instead of everybody normalizing that it's okay to treat Black people this way, it's okay to kill us, it's okay to miseducate us, it's okay to not give us the resources, and everybody just look at us, and because we so brilliant, we so everything, right? That you like, why are these fools still surviving through this madness? Because we're just brilliant. You can't take that out of us. But it's normalized, but that stuff that wears on us, it wears on our mental health, it wears on our communities. And so all these other outcomes come out, and now people are pathologizing that instead of looking at the system. So in order to disrupt it, you really got to look at the system for how it was created, how it operates, and then you have to be transformative around that. And it does go through presenting good policy to correct and reverse the bad policies that are out there. Thanks. Also, wait, one more thing. We have to listen to the people who are incarcerated. I do want to share that Washington, we have the Black Prisoners Caucus, started in 1972 in Monroe. This is where Black folks and men started, and there's more chapters now where they started educating themselves. They started looking at what greatness we have and what can we share with each other, teaching each other different languages, math, what have you, building a sense of community. And similar to what you guys were sharing about the in and out, where people come in and they're learning from the genius that's inside. And similar to what happens in what Chris was saying, as soon as the powers that be start seeing that they're building power, they like in themselves, they're building some collective power, they start trying to shut things down. But we have to listen to those who are most impacted, who are the young people who are in the juveniles, our young people who are in ICE detentions, and to the people who are in there. They are the best ones to tell us how to reverse it. They're the best ones to tell us how to fix this and fix the solution. And also the young people who are currently in the schools, because what Queez is talking about, my son doesn't have that same level of dynamics at his school, but he's nervous. He's already quick to, let me tell you what I need to tell you. But my son was doing that in elementary school. I'm gonna be honest with you. And I knew other young boys did the same thing. They ain't gonna tell you their birthday, because I told my son, you don't talk to the people, you don't say nothing to them till I get up there. You tell them to talk to my mother, because we always knew it was gonna be a setup. They're waiting to figure out what can they write up to get you in trouble versus having someone to advocate for you. And the adultism is you don't talk back to adults in respect. So just wanted to put that out there, that it's cultural that we don't share our business, because there's always a catch-22 with it, but also it's really truly just not safe for our children in these schools, for suspensions, getting kicked out, being targeted. Next thing you know, you want me to put you outside, then security comes. I have told my son, when they want to put you outside the classroom from raising your hand, just say, I have a right to my education. I'm not gonna go out. But I was told don't do that, because when security comes, it's gonna cost him a bigger issue, because if he advocates with the security, it's likely he can go to jail. That's another catch-22 when he has a right to education. How dare anybody kick my son out from his learning when we've been denied for centuries of our learning? So I hope that makes sense for you all, that this is about a Black experience that some people don't understand. But at the end of the day, even when we advocate through our trauma, it's a catch-22 down to the fact that our lives can be lost, or we're gonna be incarcerated for way too many years and then traumatized by the incarceration. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And also earlier in your remarks, highlighting for us that it's not just a matter of access to education, but what the content of that education is and the ways in which we have to challenge our conventional narratives that actually help uphold the system that we have. And so Tai, I will let you take this last comment before we open up to questions from the audience about your work introducing higher education to prisons and how we might reverse that flow so that we can generate movement within carceral systems outward. And I just want to share with you a quote, Tai and others, that is skeptical about higher education in prisons. And it goes, a college that enters today's prison system becomes the handmaiden of something irredeemably corrupt. Out on the street, liberal arts colleges are bastions of class and racial privilege. When they step inside a prison to help a fraction of those confined there, they provide a fig leaf for a system that should instead be abolished. To make matters worse, the implicit message, the college in prison, that hard work and individual discipline can make bad people better, strengthens the logic of punishment and the illusion that American laws are colorblind and fair. And so under such conditions, the liberal arts becomes a caricature offering transformation to the wayward convict. College and prison cannot and must not be reconciled. As someone who teaches in prisons, I disagree, but I am aware that we must grapple with that concern. And so I wonder, Tai, if you can tell us some of the successes and some of the intricacies as you navigate this political question.
So just to address what you just said, that statement you read, I hear statements like that. And I say that oftentimes it comes from the privileged, right? Folks that are not in these facilities. And so again, I feel that we can't abolish, prison programs, because there's still people in prison, right? And so no matter what, we need to get into these spaces where education has been denied and be able to provide that education. I believe that education is truly transformative, right? And it has the power to heal, it has the power to educate, it has the power to transform. And so again, I would say, I would double down and say, you know, in the backyard of every prison, there is a college, a university that should be tapped into for those resources to be able to provide those types of educational support programs that is needed. The other thing that I kind of wanted to just say to all of you is that something that I found just in my research, right? So on any given day, there's 48,000 youth that are currently incarcerated, right, in facilities. And although that sounds like a really astonishing number, that has gone down. So since 2000, the number of youth that are confined have drastically reduced by nearly 60%. And so I think, again, it's by introducing these educational programs. I know specifically here in California, we could definitely see these changes just looking at our juvenile facilities. And so we have some moves here in LA County to really transform youth justice. We're looking to move it out of the probation department and into youth development. And so when you talk about ways of dismantling, I think there's several strategies, and we can look at what has been used in the past and build on that. And so again, I think we need to focus a lot on the in-school services and really centering the voices of the youth that are affected, right? As well as folks that have been affected that are currently in adult facilities. I think we need to respond to whatever trauma is happening in these schools with resources, support, social workers, and not school police or school resource officers, right? We need to sit down with students and figure out what's happening. Why are they disrupting, right? Or why are they having a hard time in school? And recognizing that most of these students that are kicked out, that are suspended, are done so because of like willful defiance and not necessarily for some of the horrible things that I think folks are thinking, right? We need to focus on services in the community, right? So this all needs to be community-based. There needs to be wraparound services, not just for that student, but if their family is struggling, right? We need to make sure that folks have secure housing. We need to make sure that we're distributing these resources. And so when we talk about looking at these schools that are heavily policed, oftentimes they're in, low-income neighborhoods. We talk about seeing these high fences. Sometimes they have barbed wire. We have these metal detectors. And I tell you, when you go to Beverly Hills High and some of these other schools, you don't see that. And so that lets me know that it's not needed, that what's needed are resources, support, mentorship, guidance. And so I will say that the other thing I wanted to just mention is that the Claremont colleges where I work, we say that we're in Prison Valley because literally within 20 minutes of our institution, we have 3 prisons and we have 2 juvenile facilities. And we're doing work in all of these spaces, right? In some way or some fashion. And it does make a difference, right? I could read you student testimonials that talk about how education has transformed them, the importance of having folks from the outside come in and see them, right? Like we said, not see them as a number, but see them as a human being, see them as someone who is smart, someone who can contribute to a classroom discussion. And so again, I think we need to continue to invest in education. I think we need to continue to invest in youth and these other support services that we know really make a difference in communities, especially communities that are already struggling.
Thank you so much. I'm hoping that some of you all in the audience have questions, and just to allow for the possibility that we could actually hear your voices and maybe even see your beautiful faces, I'm asking you to raise your little blue hand virtually through the participants feature. And I am going to begin by calling on Phoenix. Hi, Phoenix. And when you're called upon, please unmute yourself and tell us who you are. Are you a student? Are you a faculty member, community member? And if you want to direct your question to someone in particular, please let us know. So Phoenix.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay? All right, awesome. I am currently a senior Lewis and Clark student. And my question is just more general for everyone on the panel. I've been looking at post-grad plans because what comes next when we leave college? And one of the organizations I've been looking at focuses on helping, quote on their website, high achieving, low income students, high school students, navigate the college search process, which sounds like a great thing, but then you focus on the high achievement aspect of it. And I'm wondering how you all would respond to something like that of, going into an underrepresented population and trying to help them, navigate a challenging process, but focusing on a specific group of those people that are specifically high achieving.
That's a great question. Emija?
Thank you, Phoenix. I think that it's always important to share with any group of students, especially in high school, access and opportunities of how to apply for financial aid and, how to write your admission statements. I think that goes for any group. I always have concern, like why someone wants to go help some underrepresented group as if they don't have the expertise and the leadership to do it themselves. Oftentimes these underrepresented groups are very much self-determined and they do have the expertise. It's just that they oftentimes don't have the resources. And I think that I would just want to be 100% transparent with you. I think that it's great if you want to go there and do the work in solidarity, but don't go there doing the work with the savior complex that I'm about to go fix some people. We don't need fixing. And I think that people who feel that who are privileged or determined privilege to go into your community or within yourselves and work on yourself and fix yourself while we fix ourselves, because we all got to do work. So if you want to do that, because it's definitely needed, especially with the COVID and our education system is having to adjust. And I'm not sure what the new normal will truly be once we come out of COVID. But as long as you're going to go in there to build a real relationship, because communities know when you come in there, you got a little bit of resource, and you got an interest, and then you bounce out. And especially if you ain't from the community, then you can go put it on your resume, talk about how you didn't work with some people of color, and you move on up. That's taking advantage of that community. So if you can go in there and do it in a way that's a solidarity, bring your expertise, get some leadership development. You have to take leadership from the community if that's what your interest is. And also, if you go work with youth, you have to go in there respecting their family and their parents. So sometimes we come into these situations, and it's across race. We have a savior complex. We want to go fix some people. They something wrong with their mama, or the daddy's not there. No, we know how to, this country has broken up a lot of people's families, and then the institutions continue to break them up. And we know how to come together and survive that. And I want to give you one policy around how the school to prison pipeline works. They changed the policies, at least in Washington, and I'm thinking it's in other states because this is coming from the feds, where they want to look at attendance. They want to make sure kids are showing up, and they say it is because we want to make, the more you're at school, the more we know you're learning. But actually dollars follow that attendance. So it's about money too. And when the families aren't there the way a teacher or a secretary wants you to be there, then they will send you to family court. So that is a threat to families, that if you don't show up and act the way I want you to, and I check mark you off for late or tardy or absent, that's school to prison pipeline. And people don't think about it like that, but it's about money. So when you go into these spaces, you need to understand the policies, you need to understand the landmarks and the booby traps around that community. And you want to come in there and be in solidarity and take leadership from that community. Don't come in there trying to tell them what they need to be doing because of this project or what we learned at college. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, the miseducation in these colleges is real too. Thank you. And I say all that with love. I say it all with love. And I say it now because if you go in there and you don't hear me, somebody like, you're going to meet somebody like me that's going to tell you, and I'm going to tell you in a different way because it's going to be about my child. So I'm telling you now with love. Thank you.
Any other responses to that? Quiz?
Yes, this has been a problem for me for a long time. Really, this is coming from them saying inner city low income kids that they talking about. One, that shit sounds like the pick of the litter to me. Like, yeah, let's go find some high achieving. You feel me? Like, let's go find some high achieving N words. Let's go get us one type shit. That's just how it sounded to me. No disrespect to that program. That's just how it sounded to me coming off. Second, look, just when you go, like, go with the right intent. Go understand intent versus impact, though, because your intent may be good, but the impact might rub people the wrong way. Please do not, when they talk and say, that's interesting, very interesting. Like, I hate that shit. It seemed like every class that came, I became like a project type. Like, I was like, we like felt like we was, you feel me, like in a zoo type shit, and people came to try to, in I would say though, with Miss Reiko and her class, in that Inside Out class, it was different. But with a lot of programs and a lot of nonprofit, they become projects. You feel me? Like, we're gonna get you to this place. We're gonna be a part of your story, and that's what they chase. A part of that story. Every N word that we can achieve, we get that under our belt. You feel me? And that's gonna raise our program. So again, all due respect, but just like, be careful when you interacting with, like, they just like you. It's equalization. You feel me? They smart because they come from low income in inner cities like that, and they made it to where they at, to where they even have the chance to, be seen and be helped, and you made it. You feel me? Like, if you make it to high school senior, like, you really like have beat the odds, because a lot of my brothers and sisters ain't making it that far. You feel me? So like, just really, I say all that to say, like, just be careful. Sometimes it's impact or intent versus impact. You feel me? Always had the right intentions, but sometimes the impact may be different. And just try to live in their world. You feel me? Because you're not gonna understand a lot of stuff that's going on. Just try. You feel me? It's okay to ask questions. Just be the real you, because a lot of people in the hood is fake. Like, a whole bunch of shit is who got the most money, who can make it the furthest, so just be real. When they go to, like, okay, this is somebody that's real. I could really talk to this person. They not treating me like I'm some broke ass. You feel me? Like, they not treating me like that. Like, we equal. We in school and we learning together, and they here to help. Like, when I know you, Rob Richardson, my mentor, always said, we don't care how much you know until we know how much you care. Facts.
And if
With all love.
add one thing, I would say that's why training is so important. I want to highlight that Inside Out training. It's a 6-day intensive kind of training that, tailors the pedagogy of bringing two distinct groups together, right? Our inside and outside folks. And so I think training is really important, and also who's doing the training. Right. I love the fact that half of our Inside Out training is done by folks that are either currently incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, to really center those voices and many of the experiences that we've shared.
So Phoenix, good interview question. If you get an interview, what kind of training do you offer? It'll show them how serious and careful you are. Marion, question from you. This may even be the last question we have time for, but I don't see other hands. I could be wrong, but Marion, go ahead.
All right. Hi. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. I am currently a senior history student, and I'm writing my thesis about the gentrification of public education in Washington, D.C. And I've encountered this with a lot of the material that I've been using for my research. And my question, I think Reiko really saw it coming with her third eye there. But my question is college the answer to this school to prison pipeline, or is it a distraction from fixing the amount of resources that are put into schools and put into students on the systemic level?
Ben, and then unmute. Ben.
There we go. Sorry. This thing is like, I've been trying to raise my hand, but my phone won't let me do it. I wouldn't say it's the answer. I would completely, but it's necessary, right? I believe it's necessary for people to come into the prison that are educators. Sorry, I just had to decline a call because no one's answering my emails that says do not call me. It's important for people to come into the prison because them walls are, I've said it over and over again, they're meant to keep you out more than they're meant to keep us in. But I was laughing my ass off when Queez was talking because we have an inner joke about, that kind of thing, right? Like, how people, like one guy came in and wanted to do a prison board game and he did it called Doing Time. You know what I mean? That's off the topic, but it's not the answer, but it's necessary, right? Like people need to come in there to learn, and to learn with us, right? So it's important, right? Because I think people, even when people come in that see us as human beings that are activists, there's still an othering that goes on a little bit. There's always that with human beings, right? Until you understand or have a context. And I think it's important for learning context, but like I said, just like y'all have reiterated, that the education that I did get in school, it wasn't real truth. Like it was, it was revised history, and I didn't even see the importance of history until I took Rego's class. To be honest with you, it wasn't something I was interested in. But now I realize how important it is, right? And I have some friends that are missionaries in Cambodia who I met in prison, and the difference between them and every other denomination I ever met is they go over there with what has been talked about here, this idea that they're going to give and teach, right? But before these guys went over there, like they were required to learn 2 years of the language and the culture, to learn what was disrespectful and what wasn't, to learn, so that these people could hear what they had to say and learn, and the other people could learn, and they could build their own traditions from their own culture, right? So I think I don't know what the answer is, right? I mean, but for me, the answer is building. You in one of the ways you do that is a tool through education. You come into the prison and I hope that you someday get to view the infirmary and you get to look at the people that are dying up there. I hope that you get to come in and educators get a chance to see the death chamber, right? That they get to stand in front of that place where people have been put to death, and there's always this big conflict about education coming in to view the prison because they feel they don't want to step on our toes, but it's necessary. Even though you're standing in front of my house, which is my house, on a tour, like I feel like you need to be there for sometimes.
If I can just add one thing, I will say that I personally do believe that education is important. I am a research person, and so just looking at what has the greatest impact on overall recidivism, it is education, right? It's educational attainment. And the higher those educational attainment levels get, the lower recidivism is. And so I will say that it is education, it's trauma-informed programming and services, right? It's community support. But again, I do think education is a huge component that we definitely shouldn't ignore.
Carrie.
I would say that the high school that I'm working at has a similar piece. We've definitely been a low income high school for a long time. I've been there for 21 years, and our neighborhood is changing significantly because of the gentrification project that's happening. But I also feel like the education is very important. And I go back to our students who have gone off to college, but then returned back to the community. We have more teachers of color at our high school because they were students at our high school, and we have more teachers of color in our community because they graduated from our high school, and now they are the leaders in the community. we have a number of social workers that are from our community, from our high school. They graduated from our high school and they're coming back and they're doing the work and they're running the after school programs. They're doing the work for their community that our system says you have to have a degree for, right? Like you have to have a degree to be a teacher in a public school, which on one level is completely crazy because anyone can teach anybody anything. But in a system that says you have to have this paperwork to do this, I think that education is incredibly important. And what we're seeing with our students who are coming back and teaching in our community, their love for their students, the community that they're creating, how much our current students love those teachers, it's transforming what we have in our community.
Unfortunately, oh, Emija, last word on this, and I'll have the actual last word because we're running out of time.
I'll be brief because I was thinking about that gentrification of education, and I was wondering if that was the history when there was a lot more Black educators educating Black students, a lot of people who look like themselves, look like the community that they were serving. And then I was thinking about the gentrification of maybe content. I just recently got off of an African American Studies board for Washington State, and thinking about the importance of putting in the real history so that folks are being educated before they make it to college, like, some elementary, middle school, and high school, because that makes a huge difference on the impact of how people see their contributions in the world, particularly Black and Indigenous folks, and also something about their self-concept and self-esteem. Because I agree with Tai and other folks, I really do believe in education, but it's about the content of that education that you're getting that's going to make an impact on how I love myself and how my children love themselves. And I was thinking about policy when I think about the gentrification, like those access points. We're talking about the system, how you could have all these educators. A lot of Black women were educators for a long time, but the system started to shift that will start barring and making it less accessible for people to be educators. And I also want to just be mindful that when we say educators of color, we got to go back and say, are they Black educators? Are they Indigenous educators? Because that's a different type of conversation experience and around the value of what's being shared in the educational content is what I want to say. But thank you. Those are my last comments. Thank you guys for the time.
So we've talked about how the carceral state creates flows from schools to prisons, and we've talked about how we can redirect and subvert that so that we are flowing education into carceral institutions. But I think there's another flow that Ben and Quiz and others have been suggesting, which is that we who are not incarcerated need to be educated by the people who are in carceral institutions. That is a flow that we need to take seriously and integrate and honor and listen, so that we can be in solidarity rather than position ourselves as saviors. I thank all of you, Carrie, Tai, Emija, Quiz, Ben, and all of you who are listening. It's been a wonderful conversation and hopefully the beginning of many. And again, thanks for staying over. For those of you who stuck with it, this afternoon is the panel on Black diasporic motherhood, open to anyone who wants to click on the Zoom link, as well as the keynote by anthropologist Jason DeLeon at 7, events all the way through tomorrow evening, as well as a virtual art exhibit. Thanks to Kim Brodkin and all of the co-chairs and all of our participants and audience members. This was a really informative panel. Give your selves a hand.